What do you do when the life you nearly died building becomes the exact reason someone wants you destroyed? Let me tell you about a man who once owned silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind you find on a Sunday morning with coffee and nowhere to be. The loaded kind. The kind that cleared rooms before he entered them. The kind that made grown men put their phones face down and sit up straight, without a single word being spoken. His name was Lee Min-ho. Seoul called him the Kingmaker. Manhattan called him a CEO. The streets called him untouchable. But on a Friday morning in Atlanta, at exactly 5 a.m., standing in front of a white marble grave marker with a white orchid in one tattooed hand and a pink lotus in the other, he was none of those things. He was just a man. Talking to the two people he had loved most in the world. Amber. Soo-yeon. We're still here. He stayed exactly 17 minutes. He always stayed 17 minutes, the exact amount of time Amber had smiled at him through an operating room glass, before she was gone forever on their wedding night, 4 years ago. He placed the flowers. He stood up straight. He adjusted his coat. And then, Lee Min-ho walked back to his car. Waiting in the passenger seat was his wife, Renee, Amber's twin sister. The woman Amber herself had sent to him from the other side of everything. Strapped in the back was their 9-month-old daughter, Amber Soo-yeon Lee. Coily black hair. Rich, deep brown skin. Her mother's high cheekbones, and her father's eyes, which already looked like they had opinions about everything. Min-ho got in. He looked at Renee. She reached over and squeezed his tattooed hand without saying a word. Because Renee understood that 17 minutes was sacred. And silence after it was the only appropriate response. He squeezed back. For the first time in his entire adult life, Lee Min-ho was not building an empire. He was not dismantling one. He was not sitting across from dangerous men in dark rooms, making quiet decisions that changed the shape of cities. He was driving his family home on a Friday morning. And that, right there, was the most dangerous thing he had ever done. Because somewhere across 3 cities, someone had noticed. Have you ever watched someone finally find peace, and felt in your gut that it wouldn't last? That instinct you have right now? Min-ho had it too. He just loved his family too much, to listen to it. Let me show you what Lee Min-ho had built in 4 years. By day, Hain Global Ventures was now the most respected Korean-American investment firm operating across New York, Chicago, and Atlanta. Clean. Legitimate. Immaculate. The kind of operation that got invited to White House economic summits and actually showed up. The Graceful Lotus Initiative, his black maternal health fund named after the daughter who never took her first breath, had funded 17 community clinics across 3 states. It had reduced maternal mortality rates in 2 Atlanta zip codes by numbers that made medical journals stop and pay attention. Amber Cole's name was on a building in Newark, New Jersey now. A trauma center. The hospital she had given her career to, the same hospital that had smelled like endings on the worst night of his life, had accepted a $15 million anonymous donation. Nobody publicly connected the money to Min-ho. But everybody who needed to know, knew. By night, the Kingmaker was retired. Officially. Completely. He had burned the door behind him with the kind of finality that left no handle on either side. His most trusted lieutenant, Dae-young, 9 years of service, memory like surveillance footage, now ran legitimate private security operations under the Hain umbrella. The underground network that Min-ho had once used to dismantle 4 rival organizations in his grief era had been systematically converted into a community intelligence operation. Min-ho had not made a single underground call in 14 months. Instead, he coached Amber Soo-yeon's eventual future soccer team in his head during board meetings. He had learned how to make Renee's coffee exactly right, 2 hands wrapped around the cup even in summer, specific temperature, specific ratio, and he made it every single morning without being asked. He had learned that being a husband and a father required a completely different kind of precision than running an empire. Harder in ways he had not anticipated. More rewarding in ways that still caught him off guard. Last Tuesday, Amber Suyan had grabbed his finger in her tiny fist and laughed directly at his face for no reason. The Kingmaker had laughed back like a completely unhinged person, and Renee had filmed the whole thing on her phone. This was the man Lee Min-ho had become. And this was exactly the man that someone, somewhere, had decided needed to be destroyed. The attack that was coming for Min-ho's family had not been planned recently. It had been planned for 3 years. And the person who planned it, had been inside his life the entire time. His name was Marcus Webb. 32 years old. Houston, Texas born. The kind of handsome that costs other people everything. Smooth talker. Selective memory. The specific kind of charming that Amber had seen through immediately 6 years ago when she warned Renee, that man will take everything you have and leave when the bill comes. Amber had been right. Marcus had left the moment Renee told him she was pregnant. No discussion. No scene. Just a Tuesday morning, an empty apartment, and a note on the kitchen counter that said "I'm not ready for this," as if readiness was the issue, and not character. Renee had not heard from him in over a year. Until a Thursday afternoon, when a black SUV pulled up outside the Graceful Lotus Initiative's Atlanta office, and Marcus Webb stepped out in a suit that cost more than his last 3 apartments combined. Dae-young saw him on the camera feed first. He called Min-ho. He said 4 words. "The X is here." Min-ho arrived in 11 minutes. He walked into the lobby and found Marcus sitting in a chair with the specific, relaxed posture of a man who believed he had leverage. Legs crossed. Phone in hand. Smiling at the receptionist like he was doing her a favor by existing. Min-ho stood in the doorway. Marcus looked up. The smile stayed on Marcus's face approximately 1 second longer than his instincts should have allowed. "Lee Min-ho," Marcus said. "I've heard a lot about you." Min-ho said nothing. He simply looked at Marcus the way a man looks at something he has already made a decision about, simply waiting for the appropriate moment to act on it. Marcus uncrossed his legs. "I want to see my daughter. Renee's baby. Amara. She's mine biologically and I have rights." "Her name," Min-ho interrupted, and his voice was the quiet kind, the loaded kind, the kind that used to clear rooms, "is Amber Suyan Lee." Marcus blinked. "I have a lawyer." "You have 30 seconds to leave this building," Min-ho said. "I suggest you use them. Now, before you decide Marcus Webb is just a desperate, absent father who made a terrible mistake and deserves redemption, you need to understand something. Marcus Webb had not found Renee accidentally. He had been sent. The man who funded Marcus Webb's new suit, his lawyer, his SUV, and his sudden interest in a daughter he had abandoned, was the same man who had been rebuilding a network across New York and Chicago for 3 years. Waiting. Specifically waiting for Lee Min-ho to have something worth taking. And that connection was about to unravel everything. Dae-young found the thread in 72 hours. He walked into Min-ho's home office at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, Renee asleep down the hall, Amber Suyan breathing softly in the nursery, and placed a single folder on the desk. Min-ho opened it. Inside were financial records. Communication logs. A network diagram connecting Marcus Webb to a shell company in Chicago called Meridian Capital Group. And Meridian Capital Group connected directly to a man named Park Sung-jin. Min-ho stared at that name for a very long time. Park Sung-jin. 45 years old. Former second-in-command of one of the 4 organizations Min-ho had systematically dismantled in his grief era 3 years ago. The one who had rebuilt quietly. Patiently. Under new names and legitimate fronts. The one who had sent a photograph of Renee outside a prenatal appointment 14 months ago, just to say, "We see you." Min-ho had neutralized that specific threat back then through financial exposure and federal tips. He had assumed it was over. But Park Sung-jin had simply waited. Because Park Sung-jin understood something about Lee Min-ho that most of his enemies had never figured out. You cannot threaten a man who has nothing to lose. But give him a family. Give him a wife. Give him a daughter with her mother's cheekbones and her father's eyes. Give him 17 minutes every Friday, a coffee made at a specific temperature, and a baby who laughs directly at his face for no reason. And suddenly, the most dangerous man in 3 cities, is the most vulnerable man in 3 cities. Park Sung-jin had not been attacking Min-ho's empire. He had been waiting for Min-ho to build something worth destroying. Ask yourself this, and I mean really sit with it. Is love a strength, or a weakness? The answer is both. Simultaneously. Always. And Min-ho was about to find out exactly what that costs. Min-ho did not tell Renee immediately. He told himself it was protection. That he needed more information before alarming her. That a nursing mother did not need to carry this weight yet. Renee found out on a Wednesday. Not from Min-ho. From a colleague at the initiative named Claire, who had been approached by a man offering money for internal donor lists and Lee Min-ho's weekly schedule. The man had introduced himself as a journalist. But Claire was exactly the kind of woman who takes covert photographs of suspicious people. The face in the photo matched the network diagram in Dae-young's folder. Renee walked into Min-ho's office at 6 p.m. with the photograph on her phone and the specific expression she wore when she was about to say the uncomfortable truth in a room full of people pretending it wasn't there. She placed the phone on his desk. How long have you known? Min-ho looked at the photograph. Then at her. 3 days. The silence that followed had weight. 3 days, she repeated. Quietly. Renee Cole did not scream. She went very quiet and very precise when she was truly angry, which Min-ho had learned was significantly more terrifying. Our daughter is 9 months old. Someone is trying to take her from us through Marcus. Someone who has been watching our family. And you sat across from me at dinner for 3 nights, and said nothing. I was protecting. Don't, she said. The same word she had used in Chicago when he tried to make a decision about her, without her. Don't make decisions about my safety without me. I am not Amber. The room went completely still. Not because it was a cruel thing to say. But because it was the truest thing that had ever been said in that room, and both of them knew it. Min-ho closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. You're right, he said. Sit down. I'll tell you everything. This was the moment that separated Lee Min-ho the kingmaker from Lee Min-ho the husband. The old Min-ho made unilateral decisions from a throne of controlled silence. This Min-ho looked at his wife and understood she deserved the truth, even when the truth was lethal. Amber had asked him to come back to the light. He had come back further than even she could have imagined. They made the plan together. Renee's idea was so precise, so devastatingly intelligent, that Dae-young, 9 years of service, having seen everything, looked at her across the table and said, with respect, "Ma'am, where have you been my entire career?" She had spent 3 years as an urban planner redesigning broken systems from the inside. Turns out, that skill transfers perfectly. The plan had 3 parts. Part 1, Marcus Webb. Renee called him. Agreed to a mediated meeting regarding custody. Marcus arrived at a neutral location in Atlanta believing he held all the cards. What he didn't know was that the mediator in the room was a federal family court judge whose daughter's life had been quietly saved by a specialized clinic funded by the Graceful Lotus Initiative. Marcus's lawyer presented the custody claim. The judge reviewed it. Then Renee's lawyer presented 17 months of documented abandonment, 0 financial contribution, and a glaring money trail connecting Marcus Webb's legal fund directly to a criminal organization currently under federal investigation. Marcus Webb left that room with nothing. Not even his dignity. Part 2, Park Sung-jin. Min-ho made 1 phone call. The last underground call he would ever make. To a contact in Chicago who had been sitting on 3 years of Park Sung-jin's financial irregularities, just waiting for the right incentive. Min-ho provided the incentive. By Friday morning, Park Sung-jin's Meridian Capital Group had been referred to federal investigators by 3 simultaneous anonymous sources across 2 states. By Friday afternoon, his accounts were frozen. By Friday evening, the same Friday Min-ho visited the grave, the most patient enemy he had ever faced was sitting in a federal building, answering questions he had no answers for. But every plan has a cost. And this one carried a ghost. During the forensic audit of Meridian Capital Group, something surfaced that nobody had been looking for. A payment. Made 4 years ago. Routed through 4 shell companies across 2 countries. Landing in the account of a hospital supply contractor at NYU Langone. A contractor responsible for emergency medication inventory. On a specific night. On a wedding night. Min-ho sat with that information for a very long time. Dae-young placed the folder on his desk and left the room without a word. Min-ho did not call Renee. Not yet. He needed 17 minutes first. He drove to the grave alone. 4 a.m., before the city woke up. He placed the white orchid, the lotus blossom, and a tiny white rosebud. He stood there, and he told Amber what he had found. That her death had not been a tragic twist of medical misfortune. That someone had reached into the most sacred night of his life, and pulled a thread. He told her that he had found them. That they were gone. That they would never touch anything he loved again. And that he was so profoundly sorry it had taken him 4 years to bring her justice. He stayed 23 minutes that Friday. 6 minutes longer than usual. Nobody would ever know why 23. Except Min-ho. Because 23 was how old Amber was when she first saw the lag in his dangerous smile, and decided to wait for it. When he got home, Renee was awake. Standing in the kitchen. Coffee made, 2 cups, specific temperature, specific ratio. She looked at his face, and she knew. She didn't ask for an immediate explanation. She handed him his cup. She stood beside him at the kitchen window, watching Atlanta wake up in the early gold light. After a long time, she said, she deserved justice. She got it, Min-ho replied. Are we safe? Yes. Is it over? Min-ho looked at his coffee. At his tattooed hands wrapped around the cup. At the kitchen of the home he had built from grief, chosen love, and 17 minutes every Friday. It's over, he said. Amber Soo-yeon made a sound from the nursery. Not crying. Just announcing herself. The specific sound of a baby who has decided that 5 a.m. is a perfectly reasonable time for everyone to be awake. Renee laughed, that deep, restrained laugh of joy that had survived a storm. Min-ho set down his coffee, and went to get his daughter. Here is what this story was always really about. Not the Mafia. Not the Empire. Not the underground networks of 3 cities. It was about this. What does a man do when the darkness he escaped comes back looking for the light he found? Lee Min-ho did not pick up his old weapons and go to war alone. He told his wife the truth. He made a plan with her at the table. He let her intelligence save their family in ways his raw power never could have. He became, fully and finally, the man Amber had seen behind the walls years ago at the gala, when she stole a salmon canopy right out of his hand and said, "You're welcome." The man who deserved to breathe. If this narrative lived in your chest today, welcome to Velvet Mafia Empire. This is where we tell the stories of shadows, survival, and the heavy price of loyalty. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a single word in the comments describing how this story makes you feel. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that justice is patient, and love is always worth the fight. Min-ho chose to come back. And because he did, Amber Soo-yeon laughs at his face for no reason every single morning. And every Friday at 5 a.m., there are now 4 flowers at that grave. The white orchid. The pink lotus. the tiny rosebud. And one small, yellow daisy, from Amber Suyun. Placed there, by her father's tattooed hands.